The host aimed to make an example out of Donald Trump, but instead, he became the perfect example of why people no longer trust mainstream media. The studio lights were blinding, the kind that made people sweat even when they weren't nervous. But Donald Trump wasn't nervous. He sat back in the chair, legs apart, shoulders relaxed, waiting. The audience murmured in anticipation, some clutching their phones, ready to record. They knew something was about to happen. Across from him sat Ethan Caldwell, a polished, sharp-dressed TV host known for his progressive slant and love of gotcha moments. He leaned forward, a smug grin creeping across his face. He had interviewed politicians, activists, and business moguls, always managing to make them stumble. But Trump? That was new territory. Mr. Trump, Ethan began, his voice smooth and rehearsed. You've always been a symbol of American success, but don't you think your approach to leadership is outdated? In today's world, shouldn't we redefine success to be more inclusive? A few audience members chuckled, some nodding in agreement. Ethan's fans, the kind who expected him to trap his guests in their own words. Trump blinked, a slow, deliberate blink. Then he leaned in, elbows on his knees, and exhaled through his nose. You mean, do I think winning is a bad thing now? Ethan smirked. Well, I think we're past the era where success is measured by wealth and power. Don't you think the world has moved on from that kind of thinking? Silence. The kind that stretches long enough to make people shift in their seats. Trump scratched his chin, then laughed. Not a polite chuckle, but a deep, genuine laugh. You're serious? He finally said. You think winning is a problem? Ethan straightened his tie. I think it can be toxic when it discourages collaboration, yes. Trump nodded slowly, like he was processing. Then he leaned back, stretching his arms across the back of his chair. Let me ask you something, he said, his voice low and deliberate. If your business was failing tonight, would you want a winner in there to fix it, or someone who's going to sit down and talk about their feelings? The audience let out a few gasps, a few scattered claps. Ethan opened his mouth, but Trump wasn't done. See, winning isn't about crushing people or being the loudest. It's about getting results. It's about protecting your team, your family, your country. It's about discipline, respect, and hard work. And if you think the world doesn't need that anymore, he shook his head, then I don't know what world you're living in, pal. Ethan forced a chuckle, but there was a flicker of something behind his eyes, hesitation. He hadn't expected Trump to hit back so fast, but he wasn't giving up that easily. All right, Ethan said, shifting in his seat. But don't you think your approach, let's be honest, has glorified competition at the expense of cooperation? Don't you feel a responsibility to promote a more progressive kind of leadership? The way he emphasized progressive just enough to let the audience know where this was going made Trump smirk. He sat up, stretching his shoulders like a boxer preparing for the next round. First of all, Trump said, his voice steady, I build businesses. Businesses ain't charities, you know that, right? He raised an eyebrow. Last time I checked, I never actually handed out participation trophies. I created jobs, built towers, and made deals that put America first. If that's outdated, then maybe we need more of it. Ethan stayed firm. Sure, but your style of leadership, aggressive, competitive, don't you think it sends the wrong message? Shouldn't we be promoting leaders who solve problems without conflict? Trump exhaled through his nose. Man, you ever run a company? Ever had to make tough decisions to keep people employed? It's not about conflict. It's about getting the job done. If people had just let me do my thing without all the noise, we'd be in a better place right now. The audience clapped a little louder this time. Ethan's jaw clenched. He knew this wasn't going the way he had planned. So he leaned forward, speaking softer, more personal. Okay, fair enough, he said, but let's talk about the real world. Let's talk about America right now. We're at a point where people are questioning what it means to lead, what it means to succeed. Some might argue that your version of success, the old school, win at all costs kind, is part of the problem. That it creates more division than unity. What do you say to that? Trump let the question hang in the air. He tapped his fingers on the armrest, eyes locked on Ethan. You ever meet a small business owner? He asked. Ethan blinked. Excuse me? A small business owner. A factory worker. A single mom working 2 jobs just to keep food on the table. You ever talk to those people? You think winning is their problem. Trump shook his head. No, but winning is what keeps the world running. The problem ain't winning. The problem is people thinking success is something bad, like it's dangerous. Weakness ain't a virtue. Strength with control. That's what keeps people safe. Somewhere in the back, a man let out a low whistle. The energy in the room had shifted. Ethan was losing his grip. But what about? Trump raised a hand, cutting him off. Not aggressively, just enough to make it clear he wasn't finished. You want to know the real problem? Trump leaned forward. It's not winning. It's people who talk about winning like it's the enemy while living in a world built and protected by winners. You sit here in your nice suit with your scripted questions, trying to tell me what's outdated. Let me tell you something, pal. If the world ever really goes sideways, if things get bad, you're going to be real happy there are still guys like me around. Dead silence. Ethan swallowed. He had another question lined up, another attempt to regain control, but the audience had shifted. They weren't nodding with him anymore. They were waiting for Trump's next words. And Trump? He wasn't letting up anytime soon. Ethan shifted in his seat. The energy in the room was slipping from his grip, and he knew it. This wasn't going the way it was supposed to. Trump wasn't fumbling. He wasn't tripping over his words or getting defensive. He was owning the room. And now, the audience wasn't just listening. They were rooting for him. Ethan forced a smile, trying to regain control. "I hear you, I do," he said, his voice measured. "But let's be honest, there's a difference between being strong and refusing to change. A lot of people would say that you're kind of thinking, this old-school mindset, is what's holding society back. Don't you think it's time to move forward?" Trump exhaled slowly, his gaze steady. He could have come back with another joke, another sharp one-liner, but instead, his tone shifted, calm, almost reflective. "You ever seen a building being torn down?" he asked. Ethan blinked. "What? A demolition? You ever watch one?" The host hesitated. "I mean, yeah, I suppose." Trump nodded. "Takes what, a few seconds to bring it down? A couple charges, a button press, and boom, it's gone." He clasped his hands together. "But you ever see one being built?" Ethan didn't answer. "That takes years," Trump continued. "Brick by brick, steel by steel, men working day and night, laying the foundation, making sure it can hold up. Now, the people with the detonators, they don't care about that. They don't think about the work, the sweat, the people who risk their lives to build it. They just want to see it come crashing down." The audience was locked in. Nobody moved. "You say moving forward," Trump said, "but moving where? Forward ain't always the right direction. Sometimes people get so caught up in change, they don't even stop to think about what they're tearing down. They don't ask if what they're breaking might actually be worth keeping." Ethan licked his lips. He could feel the weight of the moment. He had gone into this interview expecting an easy target, a businessman who would crack under pressure, a man who could be reduced to a caricature. But Trump was proving him wrong. And worse, the audience knew it. "All right," Ethan said, forcing a chuckle. "That's an interesting perspective. But let's be real, society has changed. We don't live in the same world we did when you built your empire. People are more aware now. We're thinking critically about leadership, systemic issues. Thinking critically?" Trump interrupted, raising an eyebrow. "Or just criticizing?" The crowd erupted. Some clapped, some gasped, and even Ethan's own camera crew exchanged looks. This wasn't just an interview anymore. This was a battle. Ethan held up his hands, trying to regain his composure. Okay, he said over the noise. "So let me ask you this. If success, if winning is so important, why do you think so many people push back against it? Why do so many people feel like it's outdated?" Trump let the question hang in the air for a beat before leaning in, his voice lower now, almost conspiratorial. "Because losers don't like being reminded they're losers." The crowd exploded. Some stood up, clapping. Others just sat there, stunned. Ethan opened his mouth, but nothing came out. Trump let the reaction ride out before sitting back. "Look," he said, "I ain't saying everybody needs to be some billionaire tycoon. I'm saying life's gonna throw challenges at you, whether you like it or not. And when it does, the world ain't gonna care about your feelings. It's gonna ask you one question. Can you take the hit and keep moving forward?" Ethan had nothing, no quip, no comeback. Just silence. But outside of that studio, something even bigger was happening. Because the second that moment hit the internet, everything changed. The moment the interview ended, Ethan barely managed to keep his professional smile intact as the cameras cut. But Trump? He simply stood, stretched his shoulders, and gave the audience a small wave before walking off the set like nothing had happened. Backstage, producers scrambled. Ethan's earpiece buzzed with frantic voices. That did not go as planned. Social media is already picking it up. Cut the controversial parts before we post it online. But it was too late. Someone in the live audience had already uploaded clips. Within minutes, the internet was on fire. Trump body slams TV host. Donald Trump destroys woke media in live debate. This is why we still need real leaders like Trump. The video spread like wildfire, jumping from Twitter to Facebook to YouTube. People clipped the best moments, overlaying reaction memes, slow-motion replays, and even dramatic background music. Within hours, the clip was trending #1, and the comments? A battleground. I don't even like Trump, but this was incredible. He said what everyone's been thinking, but too scared to say. Notice how the host had nothing when Trump turned the tables. Classic. Of course, the backlash wasn't far behind. Just another billionaire stuck in the past. Toxic leadership at its finest. Can we stop pretending this guy is some intellectual? Ethan's network scrambled for damage control. They released a carefully worded statement about how differing opinions spark meaningful conversations. Ethan himself went on Twitter, posting, "Healthy debate is important. I respect Mr. Trump's views, even if I don't agree. Let's keep the conversation civil." But no one cared. The internet had already decided who won. Meanwhile, Trump, he didn't post a single thing. No tweets, no press statements. He simply went about his day, unbothered. Because unlike the people arguing in the comment sections, he had nothing to prove. But as the dust settled, a much bigger question started floating around. Was this just a viral moment, or had Trump exposed something deeper about modern media? Days passed, but the clip refused to die down. It was everywhere on morning shows, podcasts, even news segments dissecting what it all meant. Some called it a wake-up call. Others labeled it a manufactured controversy. But one thing was clear. People weren't just talking about Trump. They were talking about something bigger, that on one side, people were saying Trump had exposed the hypocrisy of modern media. How hosts like Ethan love to push an agenda, but fold the second they're challenged. They expect leaders to just nod along, but the moment someone thinks for themselves, they freak out. On the other side, critics argued that Trump was just another rich businessman clinging to outdated ideas. It's easy to preach winning when you're living in a penthouse. But then something interesting happened. Small business owners, factory workers, military vets, single moms, people who actually knew what success looked like in the real world started speaking up. A viral Facebook post from a retired factory worker went everywhere. Trump gets it. Success isn't about being a bully. It's about getting results. We need more of that. A mother from Ohio shared a video. "I raised 3 kids on my own. If I hadn't been focused on winning, they wouldn't have eaten. Don't tell me success is a bad thing." Even a quiet clip of an older man at a diner went viral. He was watching the interview on his phone, shaking his head. These kids don't know what real struggle is. They think life's about debating nonsense on TV. Trump, he understands real life. Ethan, meanwhile, went silent. The network kept pushing other stories to shift attention, but it didn't work. Every attempt to move on was met with one question over and over again. Why did a businessman have more common sense than a professional journalist? And that's when the real conversation began. Not about Trump, not about the interview, but about the bigger picture. Had modern society really gone soft? Were people so afraid of real success that they wanted to pretend it wasn't necessary? Was the media actually shaping culture or just controlling it? These weren't just viral talking points anymore. They were dinner table conversations. People weren't just watching. They were waking up. And Trump? He still hadn't said a word that a week later, Trump finally spoke. Not through a press release, not on social media. It was during a casual interview in a small diner in New York City. A local reporter asked him about the viral moment, expecting some kind of damage control. Instead, Trump wiped his hands on a napkin, took a sip of his coffee, and shrugged. "Look, pal, I wasn't trying to prove anything. I was just being honest." The reporter pressed. "But did you expect the reaction to be this huge?" Trump chuckled. "I've been around a long time. People always act surprised when someone tells the truth. That's the world we live in now." The simplicity of his response hit harder than any speech. No grand statement, no victory lap, just a man who said what he believed and moved on. But the real impact? That was still unfolding. Ethan Caldwell's show saw a ratings drop. His network quietly pushed him into different segments, away from high-profile interviews. He wasn't canceled, but he wasn't the same rising star either. Meanwhile, something unexpected started happening. People began re-watching Trump's old speeches, his interviews, even his business deals, seeing them in a new light. Clips of his famous art of the deal resurfaced. Sometimes, you have to play hardball to get results. People started using it in discussions about leadership, resilience, and real success. And outside the online debates, in the real world, something shifted. Young entrepreneurs started showing up at business seminars, pushing themselves harder. Parents talked about teaching their kids the value of hard work instead of entitlement. Workers found themselves standing a little taller, pushing through challenges instead of complaining about them. Not because Trump told them to, but because they saw the difference between real success and performative weakness. In the end, this wasn't about one interview. It wasn't about Trump versus Ethan Caldwell. It was about a world that had forgotten what success actually meant and one man who reminded them. If you made it this far, ask yourself, what kind of success do you value? Is it the kind that folds the moment it's questioned, or the kind that stands firm when it matters most? Because at the end of the day, success isn't about money or power. It's about who you are when no one's watching. Like what you heard, subscribe for more stories that make you think. Because in a world full of noise, the truth still matters.